Today, we're going to dive into liver cirrhosis, but we're not going to look at it as just some disease. Instead, we're going to see it for what it really is, this incredible, destructive chain reaction, a domino effect that unfolds inside one of the body's most important organs. So let's get into it and see what happens when that very first piece starts to fall.
Now that seems like a simple question, right? But the answer, whoa, it is anything but. It's really a story about the body desperately trying to heal itself, but in a way that just goes terribly, terribly wrong. It creates this cascade of problems that are actually way more dangerous than the original injury itself. So where does this all begin? You know, like any chain of dominoes, it all just starts with one little push. That first domino to fall is the initial injury to the liver cells, the hepatocells. And that first push, well, it can come from all sorts of places. Viruses, alcohol, different toxins, or even non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. But here's the crucial part. They all lead to the exact same problem. They damage the liver cells. And that damage forces the body to respond, which sets this entire chain reaction in motion.
Okay, and this is where the story takes a crazy turn. The body's response, its attempt to heal, is actually what causes the real problem. It's one of those classic cases where the cure, well, it actually ends up being way worse than the disease.
So the body kind of fights back with this two-part plan. First, it tries to replace the cells it lost by forming what are called regenerative nodules. You can just think of them as these little clumps of new liver cells. But at the exact same time, the liver's special repair crew, these cells called stellate cells, they go into complete overdrive, and they start pumping out collagen. And that, my friends, is scar tissue. That whole scarring process is called fibrosis. And right there, you can see the huge problem starting to form. These new clumps of cells, plus this web of tough, fibrous scar tissue, it starts to completely mess up the liver's whole internal layout. It's literally squeezing the organ from the inside out. So all that squeezing from the inside, it knocks over the next massive domino, a catastrophic traffic jam in the liver's main blood supply. Medically, this condition has a name, and it's portal hypertension. And believe it or not, you can actually measure this traffic jam. Portal hypertension officially kicks in when the pressure difference between two key veins climbs past just 6 to 8 millimeters of mercury. I mean, it sounds like such a tiny number, but the consequences? They're enormous. Basically, all that internal scarring is creating a roadblock on the portal vein. Now, this vein is the superhighway that carries all this nutrient-rich blood from your gut to your liver. So with the main road completely blocked, blood starts backing up and the pressure just skyrockets. So think about it. When a major highway gets shut down, what happens? Traffic gets crazy and everyone desperately starts looking for alternate routes, right? Well, the exact same thing happens inside the body. That backed up blood is forced to find detours, and it starts rerouting itself through these smaller, weaker blood vessels that were never, ever designed to handle this much flow. And these detours, doctors call them collaterals, they start popping up in some really, really dangerous places. We're talking swollen, fragile veins in the esophagus and the stomach, which can just rupture and cause life-threatening bleeding. The pressure can even back all the way up into the colon. Yeah, these aren't safe country roads. These are like rickety, dangerous shortcuts that are just waiting to collapse. Okay, so to really get what happens next, you've got to understand the liver's unique plumbing system. It actually has a dual blood supply. About 70% of its blood comes from that big, low-pressure portal vein we've been talking about. The other 30% comes from the high-pressure hepatic artery. And these two systems have this balancing act going on. As the flow from the portal vein gets blocked and goes down, the body tries to make up for it by ramping up the flow from the artery. And in really bad cases, the pressure gets so intense that something pretty wild happens. The blood flow in the portal vein actually reverses direction. I'm serious. Instead of flowing to the liver, it starts flowing away from it. There's a term for this. It's called hepatofugal flow. And here's a cool little fact. The Latin root fugal actually means to flee. The blood is literally fleeing the liver. So you have this relentless cycle, right? Damage, bad repairs, insane pressure. And all of it is just setting the stage for that last, most feared domino to fall, the development of liver cancer. And this path to cancer, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a step-by-step transformation. It all starts with those regenerative nodules we talked about. That's the body just trying to repair itself. But over time, those can become dysplastic, which just means they're starting to show precancerous changes. And from there, the next step is often full-blown hepatocellular carcinoma, or HCC for short. So, you're probably wondering, how can doctors actually see all this happening? Well, each of these stages has a really distinct signature on an MRI.
The early regenerative nodules, they're full of iron, so they look dark. The precancerous ones start to collect fat, and that changes how they look. But the real dead giveaway for cancer, the nodules become packed with new blood vessels, which makes them light up super brightly when a contrast dye is used. And this change in its blood supply is absolutely the key. As a nodule turns cancerous, it completely changes its diet, so to speak. It basically gives up on that blocked, low-pressure portal vein and instead taps directly into the high-pressure hepatic artery for all of its fuel. And that is exactly why it lights up so brightly on the scans, and it's the secret to how doctors can detect it. Radiologists use two main flavors of MRI dye to see all this. The first kind is pretty straightforward. It just stays outside the cells and maps out all the blood vessels, kind of like the plumbing. But the second kind, oh, this one is really clever. It's actually absorbed by healthy, working liver cells. This means doctors can see not just the structure, but which parts of the liver are still functional. And since cancer cells can't absorb this dye, they just show up as these dark, non-working holes. And all of this leads to a really powerful rule of thumb for doctors. That constant internal squeezing from the fibrosis, it tends to crush and get rid of most benign things, like simple cysts. So, if a new spot or lesion appears in a scarred, cirrhotic liver, it's treated with way more suspicion. It's essentially guilty until proven innocent. So, when you look at the whole picture, this domino effect of cirrhosis is really just this dramatic story of the body's best intentions going completely wrong. A simple repair mechanism, just repeated over and over, leads to a massive traffic jam, dangerous detours, and ultimately creates the perfect environment for cancer to grow. It's a stark reminder of that really fine line between healing and harm. And it really makes you wonder, at what point does a solution become